The first reference I encountered came from an 18859 Quarry ledger outside Aberdeen, a thin column of ink noting a delay in extraction because workers had struck unusual iron forms sealed inside the rock. The phrase was not dramatic. That was what unsettled me. It sat between routine entries about blasting powder and wagon repairs, treated as a logistical nuisance rather than a discovery. Later accounts expanded the description. Thick bars fused into curved heads, shafts longer than a man is tall, surfaces worn smooth in ways fresh fractures could not explain. Officials were summoned, not in ceremony, but in paperwork. Measurements were taken, weight estimates were penciled into margins. No celebratory dispatch followed, no scientific delegation recorded. Only a brief municipal notice attributing the objects to abandoned industrial equipment from an undocumented venture decades earlier. The explanation arrived before anyone had established what the implements actually were. What lingered was the scale. Quarry tools in mid-19th century Scotland were heavy, but not like this. These required leverage points set higher than shoulder height, grips spaced for hands farther apart than most bodies could. Manage tea comfortably. I compared the figures with engineering manuals from the same decade. The gap was not subtle. Across Europe, I would later find echoes of the same measurements, the same restrained language, the same administrative instinct to close a file quickly. But in that first entry, buried in routine accounting, the pattern had already begun to form. The ledger entry pushed me toward technical archives, the kind rarely opened unless a renovation forces a review. Weight tables, quarry schematics, insurance valuations, none of them spoke loudly. But together they began to disagree with the explanation offered in 1859. One report estimated a single iron head had more than 800 pounds, excluding its shaft. Another calculated density inconsistent with local ore deposits, suggesting smelting techniques that required sustained heat. Well beyond the portable forges common to Scottish quarries of the period, the margins were crowded with pencil corrections, recalculations, a visible discomfort with the numbers themselves. Survey maps showed anchor grooves carved high into stone walls, points where lifting rigs must have been mounted. Their elevation implied leverage, arms, longer than anything listed in contemporary equipment catalogues. Diagrams from the same decade illustrated cranes rated for half the load. Municipal engineering logs grew thinner the closer they came to the discovery year, a page torn out here, a reference to foreign machinery, without follow-up there. In a city meticulous about street widths and drainage angles, that absence felt deliberate. By the time I finished cross-checking measurements, the tools themselves had become less puzzling than the paperwork surrounding them. The technical inconsistencies pushed me toward municipal archives, the places where anomalies are supposed to leave fingerprints even when no one wants to talk about them. Property ledgers from the quarry district were intact before 1859 and methodical afterward, yet the year of the discovery carried only brief notations about altered extraction routes and reinforced storage sheds. No mention of why such accommodations were suddenly necessary. Council minutes from the same season recorded budget approvals for transport wagons rated far beyond ordinary stone haulage, then pivoted back to drainage repairs and harbor tariffs, without explanation. Shipping manifests listed crates departing Aberdeen under vague classifications: industrial salvage, obsolete apparatus, categories broad enough to swallow anything too awkward to describe precisely. Clerical handwriting changed mid-register. Entries squeezed into margins where entire paragraphs should have been. In offices obsessed with ink density and ledger balance, those distortions felt louder than erasure. Files were not destroyed. They were trimmed, redirected, flattened into something administratively harmless. What had started as a physical puzzle now looked procedural. The tools were not only difficult to account for in metal and weight, they were becoming difficult to locate on paper at all. By the time the Scottish files thinned into silence, I had learned to search for the same language elsewhere. Not headlines, not monographs, shipping tallies, rural excavation logs. Museum intake cards written in handwriting too neat to be casual. In Yorkshire, an 1872 railway cut produced oversized iron implements of uncertain classification. In the Ruhr Valley, quarry reports referenced lifting heads too heavy for existing cranes, quietly transferred to municipal depots before metallurgical testing was completed. Northern Italy offered a similar phrase decades later, translated differently but shaped the same way. Tools unsuitable for current operations, removed for assessment, no public record of outcome. The repetition was not theatrical. That was its strength. Each site described something just beyond local capacity.